Jane O'Connor, The Emperor's Silent Army. Genre: expository texts explain what certain things are and how they came to be. As you read, notice how the author explains this hidden army. Terracotta warriors of ancient China. Question of the week: what can we learn about the past by examining its relics? A strange discovery. It's just an ordinary day in early spring, or so 3 farmers think as they trudge across a field in northern China. They are looking for a good place to dig a well. There has been a drought, and they must find water or risk losing their crops later in the year. The farmers choose a spot near a grove of persimmon trees. Down they dig, 5 feet, 10 feet, still no water. They decide to keep on digging a little deeper. All of a sudden, one of the farmers feels his shovel strike against something hard. Is it a rock? It's difficult to see at the bottom of the dark hole, so the farmer kneels down for a closer look. No, it isn't a rock. It seems to be clay, and not raw clay, but clay that has been baked and made into something. But what? Now, more carefully, the men dig around the something. Perhaps it is a pot or a vase. However, what slowly reveals itself is the pottery head of a man who stares back at them, open-eyed and amazingly real-looking. The farmers have never seen anything like it before. But they do remember stories that some of the old people in the 2,000-year-old terracotta figures were discovered in the countryside of northern China. The terracotta army was discovered when well diggers found the head of a pottery man like this one. No photographs were taken that day. Their village have told stories of a pottery man found many years ago not far. Their village have told stories of a pottery man found many years ago not far from where they are now. The villagers had been scared that the pottery man would bring bad luck, so they broke it to bits, which were then reburied and forgotten. The 3 well diggers are not so superstitious. They report their discovery to a local official. Soon a group of archaeologists arrives to search the area more closely. Maybe they will find pieces of a clay body to go with the clay head. In fact, they find much more. During the weeks and months that follow, the archaeologists dig out more pottery men, which are now called by a more dignified term, terracotta figurines. The figurines are soldiers. That much is clear. But they come from a time long ago, when Chinese warriors wore knee-length robes, armor made from small iron fish scales, and elaborate top-knot hairdos. All of the soldiers are life-size or a little bigger and weigh as much as 400 pounds. They stand at attention as if waiting for the charge into battle. The only thing missing is their weapons, and those are found too. Hundreds of real bronze swords, daggers, and battle axes, as well as thousands of scattered arrowheads, all so perfectly made that, after cleaning, their ancient tips are still sharp enough to split a hair. These soldiers' hands are clenched, as if still holding their bronze weapons. Today, after nearly 30 years of work, terracotta soldiers are still being uncovered and restored. What the well diggers stumbled upon, purely by accident, has turned out to be among the largest and most incredible archaeological discoveries of modern times. Along with the Great Pyramids in Egypt, the buried army is now considered one of the true wonders of the ancient world. Spread out over several acres near the city of Xi'an, the soldiers number not in the tens or hundreds, but in the thousands, probably 7,500 total. Until 1974, nobody knew that right below the people of northern China, an enormous underground army had been standing guard silently and watchfully for more than 2,200 years. Who put them there? One man. Known as the fierce tiger of Qin, the divine son of heaven, he was the first emperor of China. Although more than 7,000 strong, the terracotta army is small compared to the emperor's real army. The quest for immortality. Before the time of Qin Shi Huang, who lived from 259 to 210 BC, there was no China. Instead, there were 7 separate kingdoms, each with its own language, currency, and ruler. For hundreds of years, they had been fighting one another. The kingdom of Qin was the fiercest. Soldiers received their pay only after they had presented their generals with the cut-off heads of enemy warriors. By 221 BC, the ruler of the Qin kingdom had eaten up his neighbors like a silkworm devouring a leaf, according to an ancient historian. The name China comes from Qin. The king of Qin now ruled over an immense empire, around 1 million square miles that stretched north and west to the Gobi Desert, south to present-day Vietnam, and east to the Yellow Sea. To the people of the time, this was the entire civilized world. Not for another 100 years would the Chinese know that empires existed beyond their boundaries. To the ruler of Qin, being called king was no longer grand enough. He wanted a title that no one else had ever had before. What he chose was Qin Shi Huang. This means first emperor, God in heaven, and almighty of the universe, all rolled into one. But no title, however superhuman it sounded, could protect him from what he feared most, dying. More than anything, the emperor. The map shows the Qin kingdom and the Qin empire in stripes. The dot indicates where the terracotta army was found. Wanted to live forever. According to legend, a magic elixir had granted eternal life to the people of the mythical Eastern Islands. Over the years, the emperor sent expeditions out to sea in search of the islands and the magic potion. But each time they came back empty-handed. If he couldn't live forever, then Qin Shi Huang was determined to live as long as possible. He ate powdered jade and drank mercury in the belief that they would prolong his life. In fact, these medicines were poison and may have caused the emperor to fall sick and die while on a tour of the easternmost outposts of his empire. He was 49 years old. If word of Qin Shi Huang's death got out while he was away from the capital, there might be a revolt. So his ministers kept the news a secret. With the emperor's body inside his chariot, the entire party traveled back to the capital city. Meals were brought into the emperor's chariot. Daily reports on affairs of state were delivered as usual, all to keep up the appearance that the emperor was alive and well. However, it was summer, and a terrible smell began to come from the chariot. But the clever ministers found a way to account for the stench. A cart was loaded with smelly, salted fish and made to precede the chariot, overpowering and masking any foul odors coming from the dead emperor. And so, Qin Shi Huang returned to the capital for burial. This painting from the 17th century shows the first emperor carried on a covered litter called a palanquin. This is a modern stone engraving of the first emperor of China. The tomb of Qin Shi Huang had been under construction for more than 30 years. It was begun when he was a young boy of 13 and was still not finished when he died. Even incomplete, the emperor's tomb was enormous, larger than his largest palace. According to legend, it had a domed ceiling inlaid with clusters of pearls to represent the sun, moon, and stars. Below was a gigantic relief map of the world, made from bronze. Bronze hills and mountains rose up from the floor, with rivers of mercury flowing into a mercury sea. Along the banks of the rivers were models of the emperor's palaces and cities, all exact replicas of the real ones. In ancient times, the Chinese believed that life after death was not so different from life on earth. The soul of a dead person could continue to enjoy all the pleasures of everyday life. So people who were rich enough constructed elaborate underground tombs filled with silk robes, jewelry, and precious stones, furniture, games, boats, chariots, everything the dead person could possibly need or want. Qin Shi Huang knew that grave robbers would try their best to loot the treasures in his tomb, so he had machines put inside the tomb that produced the rumble of thunder to scare off intruders, and mechanical crossbows at the entrance were set to fire arrows automatically should anyone dare trespass. The emperor also made certain that the workers who carried his coffin into its final resting place never revealed its exact whereabouts. As the men worked their way back through the tunnels to the tomb's entrance, a stone door came crashing down, and they were left to die, sealed inside the tomb along with the body of the emperor. Even all these measures, however, were not enough to satisfy the emperor. And so, less than a mile from the tomb, in underground trenches, the terracotta warriors were stationed. Just as flesh and blood troops had protected him during his lifetime, the terracotta troops were there to protect their ruler against any enemy for all eternity. Buried soldiers. Qin Shi Huang became emperor because of his stunning victories on the battlefield. His army was said to be 1 million strong. In every respect except for number, the terracotta army is a faithful replica of the real one. So far, terracotta troops have been found in 3 separate pits, all close to one another. A 4th pit was discovered, but it was empty. The entire army faces east. The Qin kingdom, the emperor's homeland, was in the northwest. The other kingdoms that had been conquered and had become part of his empire lay to the east. So Qin Shi Huang feared that any enemy uprising would come from that direction. The first pit is by far the biggest, more than 2 football fields long, with approximately 6,000 soldiers and horses. About 1,000 have already been excavated and restored. None of the soldiers in the army wears a helmet or carries a shield, proof of the Qin soldiers' fearlessness. But the archers stationed in the front lines don't wear any armor either. They needed to be able to move freely in order to fire their arrows with accuracy. And so these frontline sharpshooters, who were the first targets of an approaching enemy, also had the least protection. Following the vanguard are 11 long columns of foot soldiers. This diagram shows the 4 pits that have been discovered. Only 3 contain terracotta figures. And lower-ranking officers, the main body of the army, who once carried spears, battle axes, and halberds. The soldiers are prepared for an attack from any direction. Those in the extreme right and extreme left columns face out, not forward, so that they can block enemy charges from either side. Last of all comes the rear guard, 3 rows of soldiers with their backs to the rest of the army, ready to stop an attack from behind. Stationed at various points among the foot soldiers are about 50 charioteers who drove wooden chariots. Each charioteer has a team of 4 horses and is dressed in full-length armor. In some carts, a general rides beside the charioteer, ready to beat a drum to signal a charge or ring a bell to call for a retreat. The long rectangular arrangement of soldiers in Pit 1 follows a real battle formation used to defeat real enemies in ancient times. It is called a sword formation, with the frontline archers representing the tip of the sword, the chariots and the columns. In Pit 1, 3 rows of unarmored soldiers are followed by the main body of the army. of foot soldiers forming the blade, and the rear guard, the handle. Pit 2 is far smaller than Pit 1. With an estimated 900 warriors of all different ranks, Pit 2 serves as a powerful backup force to help the larger army in Pit 1. There are also almost 500 horses, about 350 chariot horses, and more than 100 cavalry horses. The terracotta horses are Mongolian ponies, not very big, but muscular and full of power. With their flaring nostrils, bared teeth, and bulging eyes, the chariot horses all look as if they are straining to gallop across a battlefield. The mane of each horse is trimmed short and its tail braided. That is so it won't get caught in the harness.